there's all these stats around, basically in any software, there's like 80% of the features are unused. And that's because of a few reasons. It's really hard for us to change our behavior. We're really lazy and we procrastinate. And so what ends up happening is we buy something and we're like, I'm just gonna do like the 3 things that are like the easiest for me. And so AI is gonna unlock so many of those features for people and make software easier to use, which I know we'll talk about a little bit later.
Hey everybody, before we get into this podcast episode, I did want to briefly do a quick plug for our upcoming 2025 Lighthouse Customer Conference. We're calling it Luminate. It's going to be April 3rd in New York City and London on Thursday, April 24th. This is a really good opportunity to come out and see some awesome data that we're going to present to you guys. But also, too, this is a great time to network with other like-minded commercial strategy leaders. So if this is something that sounds interesting to you, I'm going to go ahead and put the link up on the page now for our video viewers. But the URL is luminate.mylighthouse.com. Without further ado, let's get into the episode.
Welcome to the Spotlight Podcast. Super excited this week because we have some really awesome guests. We have Jordan Hollander, co-founder of Hotel Tech Report. You want to do a little intro, Jordan?
What's going on, Daniel? Thanks for having me. Happy to be on the show today. And yeah, Hotel Tech Report, most people know us, but for those who don't, we're the hotel industry's app store. We have about 60,000 user-generated proprietary reviews of different software solutions like Lighthouse, and we use those reviews to make the buying process easier for hoteliers. We do that in a few different ways. We have different AI summaries and content and synthesis on the site, but we also have buyer tools so you can basically find the perfect fit for you using our proprietary fit score algorithm. Or if you want to be more proactive, you can literally come to our site, take our AI tech stack audit, and we'll give you a full end-to-end tech stack recommendation. Once you're popped into the tool, we'll give you a digital transformation score, and you can even add different tools that you have so that you could add your PMS and see how the tech stack evolves around the tools that you're using.
Nice. Yeah, and then we also have Nadine here as well. Nadine, you're our head of innovation. You want to give a little intro as well?
Yes, I'm very happy to be here and nice to meet you almost in person, Jordan. So I'm head of product innovation at Lighthouse. Happy to say that I believe quite a few of our products have made it onto Hotel Tech Report. We tend to win some rewards as well. But in a nutshell, we built a commercial toolkit for the hotel industry to facilitate better commercial decision making across the board, from chain hotels all the way down to the small independent property.
So here's how I thought we could start this conversation. Let's talk a little bit about, there's a lot of major funding rounds going on at a lot of companies. So for example, just to call out like Muse, ourselves here at Lighthouse just recently had a big round, Flyer, and then even just a few days ago, right, like Room Price Genie. So yeah. I'm just kind of curious, Jordan and Nadine, it seems like, 10 or 15 years ago when I got started in hospitality, you could count on, 2 or 3 fingers all of the like tech providers, right? There were a couple of just legacy companies. But now it really seems like hotel tech is not so much off limits anymore for a lot of VC funding and just, capital in general. Jordan, could you kind of speak to maybe why you think that is, why finally hotel tech seems like it's not off limits anymore?
Yeah, so I would say there's a few different waves of venture investment in hotel tech, and the companies that you mentioned, for sure, there's Canary's another big one. Yeah. But the first wave was basically growth equity, and they would wait until a company hits like 20 or 30 million in ARR, which takes a long time in a niche market for the most part. And the really exciting thing about hotel tech is especially like those core software systems that you're talking about of the past that obviously still exist today, like a PMS. The average lifetime of a PMS between switching is like 6 to 7 years. So from an investor perspective, when you have a contract or even just a customer that it's such a sticky product that they're going to stick around for 6 to 7 years, it's really easy to underwrite those deals because you have very predictable revenue, right? And so the challenge became that when you have 6 to 7 years across the board, there's not a lot of room for like new products to come in, and VCs were really scared of doing anything that didn't touch the hotel booking process. So they're like, okay, PMS will do it. And then obviously like SiteMinder came around that will do the channel manager because it's transactional. And what happened in the next wave is that there was more value being added across the hotel tech stack, basically. So obviously revenue management systems were like the next wave of that because, like the Duettos and Ideas of the world, because they were able to basically drive essentially a guaranteed revenue boost and drop profit to the bottom line for hotels, even though they weren't capturing a transaction. But I think what we've seen recently is that the markets have just completely opened up. So there's also just the long tail of hotels that historically have been tech averse, that haven't really thought about like technology in their core business. They're just like, okay, I'm going to throw my rates on a PDF and we're going to like have winter rates and summer rates and like shoulder period rates. And so like that kind of mentality is gone. I think there's three kind of like time shift events that happen. And all of them are around buzzwords. Like in the moment, you're like, oh, this is a buzzword. Everyone's saying the same thing over and over. But like the first one was cloud computing, right? So what that did was it brought the cost of software down and it made it easier to implement. So the rep from Oracle doesn't have to travel to Bali to install the property management system anymore on premise, or they don't have to build out a sophisticated reseller network. Lighthouse is like, hey, go sign up on our website for our product right now. So so cloud infrastructure and SaaS was like the first wave. Mm-hmm. The second wave was contactless during COVID. So hoteliers were kind of sitting on their hands. They couldn't do anything. Their hotels were not open. Guests weren't coming for a period of time. And they were like, and no deals were happening in the market. So hoteliers are mostly thinking about how they grow their portfolio through deals. Brands are thinking about how they add new flags. And so what happened during COVID is they had nothing else to do. So they had to focus on their business, and labor was sidelined. So there's only one thing you could do. It's fix process. And all processes are designed around technology. So this whole, and then adding to that, just like the buzz around contactless, like, oh, I don't want to touch anyone at the front desk, or I want everything to be digital. Like all of these kind of like wealthy real estate owners were like going to their team. They're usually like, middle-aged to older people who are not super tech savvy and made their money in finance or another business. And they go to the young people on their team and they're like, hey, we got to get this tech in here so we can get guests back in. And then that was like another catalyst for tech, and that kind of stuck around after. And I think now the third event is AI, where kind of there's all these stats around, basically in any software, there's like 80% of the features are unused. And that's because of a few reasons. It's really hard for us to change our behavior. We're really lazy and we procrastinate. And so what ends up happening is we buy something and we're like, I'm just going to do like the three things that are like the easiest for me. And so AI is going to unlock so many of those features for people and make software easier to use, which I know we'll talk about a little bit later. But I think it was kind of like these three events happening basically 5 years apart each. That's just like, okay, once the contactless thing kind of died down, it was like, oh my God, AI is here. And now it's like almost impossible for a hotel owner, even if they're like 85-year-olds, billionaire real estate owner, to not be like, hey team, what are we doing with AI?
Yeah.
I also believe, if I can just add to this, especially for the long tail hotels, what we're also seeing slowly, right? And I think that could be maybe the next wave, but we're also starting to experience that there is a bit of a change in ownership. We're just discussing the 85-year-olds, but these very traditional hoteliers who might have opened these businesses and these hotels, they're partly starting to retire, right? And there's a new generation like us coming through the front door who want to run these hotels and say, well, that's not what I signed up for. I didn't sign up for spreadsheets. I didn't sign up for all this work. This is not how I'm used to working with my smartphone. So there will be a whole new wave, I think, of acceptance for this type of technology and expectation to not have to do certain things manually. So I'm very looking forward to that as well.
Totally. And I think adding to that, like in Europe, especially, there's a lot of family owned and operated hotels. And so when the kids come in, even beyond I'm used to technology in my day to day and I do everything on my phone, it's also like my dad's business is boring and I want to do something different, but like this, I can't give up this opportunity and it's a really cool business, but I want to do it my way and I want to put my flavor on it. And technology is usually the first thing they think of. We have so many reach out, not just in Europe, but also like we have the Asian American Hotel Owners Association here in the US, and it's a lot of family owned, mostly Indian immigrant families that have built up really impressive portfolios of hotels. The first thing the kids do when they graduate Cornell Hotel School is they're like, I want to bring technology to my family's business.
Exactly.
Nice. So speaking of that, and this is going to be kind of for you, Nadine, is, knowing what you guys just talked about, and being head of product innovation, what does that process look like? So for us as a company where we're like, okay, there's a niche here, there's a potential product that we could develop that would, solve this problem for this, for example, young generation of upcoming hoteliers. Is that, we have the data, let's build a product, or is it more specifically tailored? Like, how would you describe that?
It's a very good question. I am afraid I'll have to say it depends a little bit. So innovation, right, can be sparked through different events. So generally, I would like to think that modern companies like ours innovate all the time based on unmet guests' needs. So we see something is happening in our client base or during the pandemic, maybe even worldwide, and there are new needs that are not being met. And this is a moment where we, as a product team or as a product and engineering organization, will come in and say, all right, this problem seems to be very pressing. How can we solve this? And then you would start an ideation process like this. On the other hand, you also have events like AI. All of a sudden, AI goes mainstream overnight. I don't know how it happened, but it's finally here. I think we've been talking about it for 10 years. I think when I joined Hotel Tech, AI was already being talked about. I think no one knew what it meant, and definitely no one had implemented it. All of a sudden, it was there. And even my mom used it at home. She downloaded ChatGPT. And you wonder, how did we get here so quickly? And those are also moments where in the software companies, you would sit down and say, okay, look, there is technology here that we didn't have yesterday. So can we not even find new problems to solve, but solve our problems that we already solve for today with this new technology in a much more effective way? Are there things that we know aren't ideal, but all of a sudden it becomes reality? And one thing that Jordan was already alluding to was how AI really opens up the playing field, right? And that's a very good example where we always knew that democratization, is that a word, of data was a big problem in the hotel industry. So often it goes through the revenue manager who was sitting on these dashboards. We wanted to make these dashboards available to everybody in the property, but actually nobody really cared because no one could really read them and they were not really data people. But now, all of a sudden, overnight, you had something like generative AI that you could put on top of these dashboards, and it would tell you a story. And it would tell a story to your GM, to your owner, and to your sales department. So those are also moments where, as an organization, we sit down and say, okay, like there is something here. And what then usually happens is that depending on how urgent it is, how certain you are, you start to incubate a little bit. So specifically around AI, I think that's a really good example. We have a AI innovation hub. So we would then start to run tests. We would start to set up a small model, which is customer facing. We invite a couple of people just to test. We have a very tight communication with our customer advisory board. So we have a lot of touch points with the industry to see, is there something here? Can we use this? We run a beta. And only when we're really sure this is something, we would really produce and roll out to the masses. So the spark can be different, but then the process of trying to set up a group to help you unlock this value before you really bring it to your customers, that I would say is quite universal, and that's generally how you get the best results. So not in isolation, but together with the industry.
Nice. Yeah, and there's something I want to add on as a question, and I'll throw this over to you, Jordan, is we talked a little bit back at HSMAI in June, where we did kind of a sit-down, little 15-minute interview with you, and I remember you said something really cool, and it was, we've gone from just cleaning data up and putting it into Excel spreadsheets. We've gone from that to dashboards, right? And even now we're moving out of dashboards and we're getting more into what Nadine just talked about, more of like the AI enabled. Could you kind of talk through a little bit? AI is allowing us to almost kind of have, I think you may have even called it like a coach to put it into natural language for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, even for experts, dashboards and charts and visualizations tend to be really hard. I'll give you an example. We have a revenue stream within our business where we have like a daily revenue chart that looks back at like 30 days, but our revenue fluctuates from weekday to weekend. And so if you have if you look back in time and you're going 30 days back, you might have 2 weekends. So it looks like our revenue dropped for the month, even though actually it went up. So even when you're an expert, you have all these kind of nuances about how data is aggregated and collected. There was another one where like our engineer building that product was based in Europe. And so the time zone was based on Europe. So when we were in LA looking at it, it was aggregating the data on European time. So we were looking at the wrong time period. Again, all this stuff doesn't happen everywhere, but I'm just pointing out that even when you have a visualization of data, it's really hard to get stuff that's actionable and accurate, and you can get kind of directional information. So the really cool thing with AI is being able to kind of query it, and instead of looking at a chart and be like, okay, I got to go back to my developers, or in Nadine's case, her team, and say like, guys, this isn't working for this reason, and we need to change this. You could have the AI, you could query the AI on different questions, and be like, does this make sense? Were there 2 Saturdays that were compiled into this 30-day period, and then kind of look through the data and ask questions that way. And all of the expertise and logic can be programmed into the AI, and then people can ask those questions in natural language.
Yeah.
And also, I think with that, like what you're describing, right, and that's something we're seeing as well, even for the experts, the time to value is just so much quicker. I mean, I used to work in revenue management. I had a lot of charts, I had a lot of reports, and I would still be running my finger down the same pickup report until it was bloody, trying to find these outliers that I actually cared about. And sometimes there weren't any, so I wasted my time. Sometimes there was one. But that is really not necessary, right? I think these days you are really in a good position to point out what actually matters, what's actually different, and sometimes even to serve as a reason as well. That gives you a starting point for analysis. So indeed, I think for all the experts, just offloading this tactical reporting and searching for insights. And for the ones who are no experts, I mean, finally, they really have insights without having to call anybody. I think that's really a big win. Also facilitates the conversation on property around performance, unlocks collaboration to a whole different degree.
Yeah, and also too, I'm thinking of, and I can put this up on the screen right now, but this kind of ties in almost like with what we're doing with Pricing Manager too, right? Because it's making that rate recommendation, and it's saying, okay, I think you should be at 129 euro tonight. But it goes a step further than that, though, right? Because if you click onto that, you can actually see the logic behind it, but it's explained in very natural language. So it says, hey, I think you should be at 129 euro tonight. Here's why. It's because, it's because the comp set running 28-day average is more than 10% lower than we usually see. These competitors have come down in the past 24 hours. And that kind of ties back in with you don't have to have like a master's degree or be a complete data nerd to understand that, right?
And this is a great example, right, of what I was describing earlier in terms of how innovation happens. If this tool had been developed maybe 2-3 years ago, most likely we would have had some equation or something, right, that people could go back to, or some back end, or maybe they can call support. But when we were building it, we found out that one of the biggest frustrations generally with systems is the black box effect, that people really don't understand what is going into the calculation, why exactly is this triggering, also so they can judge for themselves, right? Is this something I want to follow, yes or no? So that was perfect timing, basically, to be able to unpack this in very natural language. And also a great example because it aims at these smaller hotels that most likely don't have a revenue manager. So most likely they don't see the reason directly. It's most likely an owner who had the seasonal rates that Jordan was describing earlier and is very new to this. So that was a very good example, I think.
Yeah, I think the trust factor is huge. I mean, for you guys, obviously, like, a revenue manager isn't just going to price without knowing the why. For the most part, like maybe we're getting a little more comfortable with like letting AI take over time. Like we have the same thing. We have a different trust issue in that our AI tech stack audit, we make recommendations. So we'll say like, Daniel, you're a 72-room boutique hotel in Berlin. Here's the tech stack that you need. And you click into PMS and it shows you a list of PMSs with a fit score. But you're like, did that PMS just like pay them more to be at the top? And so we have natural language processing. We have NLP that will actually like tell you, this is what hotels in Germany that are 70 to 100 rooms are saying. And then you can compare that across the other recommendations and see it degrading over time, basically. But that's our way of using the AI to build trust and show exactly why that recommendation was made, not just like, oh, hey, our K nearest neighbor model decided that this is your highest fit score,
Yeah.
I think that's a really important, it's a very important point, right? Trust is key. And also, I think that's really something to be said, right, for all the technology companies who are now toying with AI. It's not an easy one to crack because these models are partly still very, very new. So that's also something we are seeing. They are often replaced by, their original creators. So you have to be really on top of these updates, make sure they still work. it's a lot of testing that goes into this. It always looks like magic when it's working, but in reality, also for us, we've done a lot of testing in the background to make sure that this is something that we can trust and that we are in a position to debug should there be a problem, because they can also be very difficult once it's really AI driven and not just a calculation that sits in the back and you know why a certain parameter did something.
Yeah, and speaking of AI, it wouldn't be a podcast episode in 2025 if we didn't spend at least one full question talking about it. I did want to, you had a really good quote when we talked back in June, Jordan, where you said, AI will not take your job, but someone who knows how to use AI will. Or you said something kind of similar to that effect, which I thought was really, really good, because that's kind of what I'm experiencing and seeing right now is I'm already using AI a lot in my job, just within marketing alone, right? I'm using ChatGPT and I'm using Sora to create stock footage and stuff like that. So would you mind expanding a little bit on kind of why you think that is the case? And could you kind of double click on that a little bit that you brought up?
Yeah, I think it's the same that we saw with the explosion of software. I think it was maybe Satya Nadella who said like software ate the world and now AI is going to eat software. And I think it's similar. It's like when software was launched, it wasn't like, the people went away, but the people who are experts at software were all of a sudden the people in the driver's seat with all of this. And so if you're a marketer, you need to know like HubSpot and Google Ads and all these tools. And like if you're in sales, you need to know Pipedrive and Salesforce. And like so all of these tools are really important. And so AI is the next generation of tools. And there's going to be these kind of graphical user interfaces or just chat interfaces in some cases that you're going to interact with. But there's going to be there already is a whole new explosion of tools. I can tell you like that keeps me up at night a lot. Like I feel like, and I'm sure a lot of people are like this. I feel an immense amount of anxiety of like the amount of tools that are coming out with AI that I'm like, if I don't like get my head around this, then like I'm not going to be relevant in 5 years from now. And like it's like balancing like running your business today, like whether you're a hotelier or in any of our shoes, with like, oh my God, there's so much new shit coming out. Like I have to get on top of this. I have to try it. But like there's a lot of fluff out there too. It's really hard to sift through. But I think understanding those tools, and the biggest thing is no code. It's like anything that you wanted to do before that you needed your engineering team to execute on, you can now execute on yourself. And now it's not perfect yet. It's still a ways out, but we're moving closer to that. So like Zapier, as an example, launched AI interfaces. So you could say like when a lead comes into my website, like send them a message based on Zoom info data. And then like if they follow up, like add them to this Facebook ad group or whatever. And so like there's all these complex like integrations that you can do with software and AI layered on top of it. And the people who understand how to do all that stuff, it's not technical people, but they're kind of like technical. They're like non-technical ninjas, like no code ninjas. Like that is the future. And it doesn't matter whether you work in a single independent hotel, whether you're a corporate in Marriott, or whether you're the, SVP of product at Lighthouse. We're all going to be doing the same stuff. And those are the skills of the future, basically.
Yeah.
I also think it's interesting because I would claim in most cases, because we've also seen there is a lot of anxiety out there. And I didn't believe it, but we spoke to a lot of clients who really wonder if their jobs are still relevant tomorrow. And I think especially in the hotel sector, right, where there's so much manual work, where there's so much technical decision making, so much overhead cost when it comes to operations, I just wonder, are we not in a position where we can let go of all these jobs we never really wanted to do? Like they kind of came with a job, but did we really want to do this? I mean, as a front office person, right, do I really want to answer the same question all over again? Or do I want to have a personal conversation with this one client? And maybe it's a bit longer, but it's really adding to their experience. Or do I really, as a revenue manager, pull my pickup report, spend 2 hours every morning just going through just to report it back to a third person who can't understand it? I mean, those are no jobs we ever wanted to do, right? We wanted to be strategic, or we wanted to be in front of people. This is why we get into hospitality. It's not to do all of these things. And I think that's really the opportunity we have to, make hospitality fun again in a way, and really carve out a much more creative hotelier on the back of this.
For sure. And that is a good tie-in, Nadine, to, I want to pick you guys' brains on, I guess, the future. And this does not have to be AI specific, but did a survey last year where we put the feelers out to, it was like something like over 1,300 different hoteliers. And I think it was 66% were using AI in some form. So just knowing that that's generally the direction that we're headed in, and any bold predictions for 2025, or where you see things headed for 2025?
So maybe one thing I want to throw out there, and I would love to know what Jordan actually thinks about it, because he's probably actually more of an expert on that front than I am. But besides AI, which I think we've already spoken about, I do foresee a lot of consolidation overall in hotel tech. So what you've seen over the years, right? We were discussing the Oracles and Sabres from 10 years ago. Now what we're facing is a very, very segmented ecosystem, right? We have a lot of players that connect to one another. If you want to put together a tech stack, it can be very tedious. There are a lot to choose from. I would assume in the next couple of years, we will also, with the infusion of the investments we've been seeing, that there will be a lot of consolidation in the space. But I'm sure Jordan is even a bit closer to seeing companies come and go, so he might have a better perspective.
Yeah, totally. I mean, in terms of consolidation, for sure, like it's happening in our industry. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing by any means. I think it's a good thing. I think we'd rather have fewer companies that have more resources to invest in innovation. Obviously, there's a tipping point when you have too few companies and they are no longer incentivized to innovate, but we're so far from that. You don't need 700 PMSs in the world. And so I think consolidation will continue. One of the things I've been really surprised by is we do a little bit of angel investing on Hotel Tech Report's balance sheet into hotel tech companies. We find companies that are kind of more like niche, like we did a dynamic pricing for restaurants company. We did a GPO for vacation rentals. And so we've done a few that are kind of on the fringe of hotels, but we want to invest in a PMS. But I thought we were going to see a lot more exciting startups. And I think what I found is that when you're in a vertical market like we are, like there's a billion, AI video editing software that, Daniel, you'll probably use to like cut up shorts of this podcast, right? But that's because you don't require data to do that. But when you're in a vertical market like hotels and you're building software, you need data and you need integrations. And so you can't just you can't have a few guys in a room, hacking together an AI tool because you're not connected to the PMS. And if you're doing a pricing tool, you have no access to pricing data. And so I've been surprised, but there's been almost no interesting, brand new AI startups in our space. And we're seeing all the innovation come from the lighthouses of the world that are sitting on this massive data set. And now you can unlock more from the data with AI. And so my prediction is that we'll continue to see it like a slog from the startup front. I don't think we're going to see a ton of new, exciting companies coming into the brand new. There will probably be a handful, and I hope that we see more than I'm forecasting here. But I think we'll continue to see consolidation. I think we're going to see more and more outsourcing. So outsourcing of services. So outsourced revenue management, outsourced marketing. Obviously, there's digital marketing agencies are pretty mainstream. There's a lot of big revenue management consultancies. But I think you're going to see more and more of that because you don't need someone in the back office at a hotel to be doing their revenue management. You could have a centralized office that specializes in that. You get the A-team talent. The revenue manager gets to work with a group of properties the same way they would at a management company here in the US. And it's a little bit more exciting and dynamic of a role, so you end up getting better people. So I think given the spread of software, software is easier to use. I think with AI that allows us to scale and understand new markets better, I think you're going to see even outsourced sales, outsourced marketing. I think some of that stuff is going to get pulled out of the core hotel organizations in an effort to cut costs and increase margins, and also make them more flexible so they can scale up and scale down resources as needed versus having all of that expensive labor in-house.
All right, and that was pretty much a wrap right there on that conversation with Jordan and Nadine. I hope that you enjoyed that. Anytime that we get to talk to Jordan from Hotel Tech Report is really awesome because he has such a unique perspective. He gets to see the entire industry from both kind of that vendor perspective, but also the customer perspective as well. So he's got a real wealth of knowledge about pretty much everything that's going on in hotel tech. So huge thank you to Jordan for coming on the Spotlight podcast. Greatly appreciated. And big thank you to Nadine as well for taking time out of her very busy schedule. If you would like to be featured on an episode of the Spotlight podcast, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or just shoot me an email as well. So until next time, I'm Daniel Foreman here at the Spotlight Podcast. Thanks for watching.